The presenting sponsor for Socially Democratic is Dunn Street. Dunn Street is a campaign agency that specialises in community organising. We only work with people who want to build power to make the world a better place. And if you want to create change in 2025, then hit us up at dunnstreet.com.au. A special shout out to all of our Patreon members as well. And you can join our community for free or for as little as $1.50 a month. And you too can help support this podcast. All paid members receive a welcome gift. So if you have recently signed up, please check your inbox for a message from our producer asking for your shipping address, because without that, then we can't send you your merch. And finally, today's episode is brought to you by Maurice Blackburn Lawyers. For over a century, Maurice Blackburn has stood up for fairness, championing the rights of everyday Australians and shaping landmark legal reforms. Today, they're harnessing new technologies to make justice more accessible, more efficient, and more responsive to the needs of modern Australia. All right, let's get on with today's episode. We are taping this one on a Wednesday afternoon on the lands of the Massachusetts people. And joining me on the show today is someone that really needs no introduction, but for those that are unfamiliar, he found his calling as a volunteer in 1964 on the Mississippi Summer Project, and then as an organiser for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, or SNCC. This calling then drew him back to his hometown of Bakersfield, California, to begin what became a 20-year plus career as an organiser for the farm workers with Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta. In 2007 and 2008, he was instrumental in designing the grassroots field organisation for the 2008 Obama for President campaign. And today he's a senior lecturer in leadership, organising and civil society at the Kennedy School of Government here at Harvard, and has recently published a book titled People, Power, Change. And I'm proud to call him a mentor friend. And from January to early July, he's technically my boss, Marshall Ganz. Welcome back to Socially Democratic.
Good to see you, Stephen. It's good to be with you.
First of all, congratulations on the publishing of your latest book, People, Power and Change.
I had a doula. That was the secret. A book doula.
A book doula?
Yeah.
What's a book doula?
Well, it's a person who helps you birth the book.
Ah.
And, no, it was a former student who, well, now she's an assistant professor at the Kennedy School. But, yeah.
I was talking to a young person who was about to go get a job as a union organiser, and they said, Stephen, are there any books that you could recommend for me to read? I said, there's heaps. I'll send you heaps. And I did. I sent heaps of recommendations, Jane McAlevey and a couple of yours. And I said, actually, start with this one by Marshall Ganz called Sometimes David Wins. I think it's a good book to begin with.
I think so, too.
And as I said that out loud, and I said, he's also written this new book called People, Power and Change. And I thought, I've got a question to ask Marshall. What motivated you to write this now? Why did you want to write this one in particular?
Well, it's a book that I've, in one form or another, been trying to write since sometime in the 80s. And then there would be periods. The David book was, because it was my dissertation for the PhD, but I really learned a lot from doing the David book. And then it's because, in other words, well, I guess a lot of the way I teach, the pedagogy, and I think of it as a pedagogy of practice. And I realized that it's very, very similar to what attracted me to organizing. Because when I was working in civil rights in Mississippi, the part that really was generative for me was working with people to enable them to find their own sources of courage, their voice, their dignity. And that was much more about, coaching people in finding, it was like, they say the people have to claim their voices. And the thing that attracted me to civil rights was much more the courage. In other words, those having to live in a way that you have no essential control over your destiny. I mean, my father was a rabbi, but he was diagnosed later with paranoid schizophrenia. And so he wasn't available to me or my mom. And so I had to show up every Friday and be the rabbi's kid. And I wanted to be at the football game. But it was more. It was really, so I developed a lot of anger about having to be that which I'm not. And it sort of resonated with what I saw was happening people every day in Mississippi. But what really did it for me was meeting the people who were in the struggle, the SNCC organizers, young people. It was the first SNCC staff meeting I went to. I thought there'd be strategy charts and signs all over the place. They were having a preach-off. Now, if you know what a preach-off is, who could imitate Dr. King better? In other words, there was a sense of courage and celebration. How could you not want to be part of that? And so, but what I get to do now is very similar. My mom was a teacher, but she called herself an educator because it comes from the Latin educare, which means to draw out, to develop, not fill somebody's head with a bunch of facts. It's seeing each person as capable of development and growth. And that was central to my organizing, and it's also now central to how I get to teach. So there turns out to be a real sort of resonance there, I guess.
And then to put it down in paper, why did you want to, I feel like there's a moment in history right now that maybe motivated you to want to write this book.
I wanted to write the book really kind of ever since David, but I mean, you could see before Trump that there'd been a huge vacuum created. I mean, we did the Obama campaign and we built an organization, but then he didn't want any part of it. And so it fell apart. And, he turned out to be much more of a technocrat than a Democrat in little d sense. And so it began creating a vacuum. I mean, he had 2 years to do his stuff, and he health is what he got out of it. But the country was losing houses, and they were seeing the banks get all his support. So the Tea Party and all that starts in the second term, or gets wind there. And since then, Democrats haven't really had much to say that connects with real people and their struggles. And, in California, I did a lot of electoral organizing because I had some familiarity with it, but it just seems to get more and more and more rarefied. And then you see the advocacy groups, which are so dominantly funded by foundations and by Silicon Valley people. Well, that's a different world. And so you get this convergence of kind of, I think of it as change in the political means of production. People dealing with people. Not now. It's data points and data points. And here, because of the crazy lack of any control of campaign spending, you get these multi-million-dollar campaigns, but they're all digital. And I went to at the Kennedy School after the general election. We have a session with the campaign management of both campaigns.
Of the two presidentials?
Yeah, so I was in the same room for a day and a half with the Trump people and the Harris people. It was pretty interesting in many ways. But it was so clear that what the Harris campaign had been trying to do was to tell people how they ought to feel rather than listening to how they felt. I mean, it was just glaring. So it's like creating this whole world that's so decoupled from human beings and people. So it's an emptiness in so many ways. And so, in my understanding of organizing and practicing organizing, it just became more and more evident that this was missing. But that there was a hunger. And you could see it coming. And so I wanted to try to pull together what I'd learned and share it. The point of the book was not to sell lots of books. I'm not against that. But no, to try to put something in people's hands, because the other thing was really an absence of institutional memory. I work with young people in Sunrise, work with young people in March Our Lives. They had no context of really what organization looks like. And that goes to, the radical individualization of everything. And so, I mean, what I saw happen here, well, pretty dramatically with March for Our Lives. This was Parkland in Florida. Yeah. And so there were some terrific young people came out of that. First thing, they get celebritized. Then the NGO, the funders show up. Oh, we want to give you money, but you have to be a 501c3. Oh, you need a board. Oh, we should be on the board. So the model of how you actually build self-governing organization, where is it? Unions still, but outside of unions and some churches, there's not what used to be sort of the big strength of American democracy, the civic associations. They've been atrophying for a long time. So when you put these things together and you think about what organizing really is, which is about, it's enabling people to come together around shared purpose and shared interests and turn that into power. It's not aggregation of a bunch of individuals, which is what all these mobilizing things does. So it's not building the organization, the structures needed for real power. So, you go through that a bunch of times and you try doing it in different places. So, and I get to teach it, and which is really a gift, because it really is like having a conversation with the next generation, with the rising generation, and the chance to do it in different cultures and countries. You begin to see, wait a second, there's something here about what it is to ground your politics in being human. In what it is to value yourself and others. And with a colleague, he's a philosopher and a gamer. We started a class, we taught it in last January, J-term, and we call it Being Human. And it's turned out to be really powerful. It's almost like people get so alienated from their own power, their own capacity, their own sense of worth. And then you can't build much from that. I guess the other thing in organizing, I always thought that, or what I learned initially, it wasn't sort of agitating people around how bad things were. They knew that. It was like enabling them to enhance their own sense of self. I am not to be treated that way because I am somebody, I am someone. And that's so thin out there, certainly in this country. So it just feels like there's a lot more at stake. It's a lot deeper. It's a cultural thing as well as political and economic. Anyway, all of that, you could see what was happening. And I wanted to try to at least share my experience about about what it actually means to work with people to build power.
You've been teaching the organising class, both the online and on-campus class now, for a number of years. So therefore, I can't even imagine how many. You may know the number. How many students have passed through?
Yeah, it's several thousand.
Yeah, when I, in my capacity as an organiser back home in Australia, and when I left working for the party and went out on my own, and I was thinking to myself, from a business standpoint, is Dunn Street going to work? Like, is there going to be enough people that I can go and work with?
Yeah.
And actually what I quickly found out was that there's so many people out there that need to get organised, and they don't know what organising even is.
That's right.
And I'm wondering, in your journey in this time, what has been some of the basic barriers or walls for people in stopping them from finding others to get organised and work towards something?
Yeah, I think well, partly is our electoral system is so much a marketplace, and we don't have parties. I mean, we have marketplace. They're markets, and the entrepreneurial candidate competes for the brand. But in terms of an organization where you actually are a member and you actually can nominate your candidate, and you actually can have a voice in the organization. We don't have that. And so a lot of burden has been on civil society organization. But then when they start evaporating, then it's kind of like it's a blank space. And everybody, we'll do it digitally. Well, I mean, that's fine, but I just finished a book called The Extinction of Experience. And she's arguing that when two people are present to one another, there's communication on many levels. I mean, there's words and gestures, but, we sense one another. Now, the more you introduce mediating interventions, like a telephone, okay, now we got one sense, not five. And you can still communicate emotion. Zoom, you can see, we had faces before we had words, so that helps. Then let's go to a text. What winds up happening is you wind up confusing a thermometer with heat. In other words, the experience of people working with one another is very different than some proxy for that, like putting people in a category, giving people labels. It like just moves farther and farther away from the core question about humans. And so I think over time I've discovered just how fundamental that is. And it's particularly bad in this country. The difference between aggregating individual preferences and engaging with other people in doing the work to find your shared values, it's day and night. But so much of the mobilizing stuff, that's what it is. A bunch of individuals show up, go away. Is anybody taking names? No. Is there what's the next event? No. It's just mobilizing. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that there are these macro institutional problems, but there's also a fundamental problem in appreciating the fact that democracy is not something you have, it's something you do. And so it's practice. And if you're not practicing the elements and tools of democracy, it's just a theory. It's just abstract. And if it doesn't connect to your daily life challenges, then it's even more remote. So I think one of the big mistakes Democrats, let's save democracy. Well, to a lot of people, that doesn't mean anything. I mean, right after World War II, it did. But when it's so decoupled from your daily life, and it's empty. So those are the challenges. And I mean, another example, the New York Times sent a reporter with an organizer in Wisconsin right after Kamala was nominated. And so they're going door to door. A woman comes out, the guy says, I'm from the Harris campaign. You must be very concerned about choice. She's hesitating, so climate, educate. It's like he's running down a list. How do I categorize this person so that we can send the right stimulus, stimulus response? That's not dealing with people. That's reducing people it's like reducing heat to a thermometer.
Do you think that, the experience, the electoral experience in Australia is different because we have compulsory elections. So we have to fight for every vote. It's not a case of I'm just trying to drive you to the polls because you're a registered Labor Party or Conservative.
Yeah, which is good.
Yeah. It's actually a contest. Yeah. And so normally the first question you ask, and we hopefully train our people well, is what issues are most important to you? Like, get them to talk.
Yeah, of course.
And then we build a conversation based on what is most important to them, but are centred on values though. And we might eventually come and say, well, that's really interesting because our candidate is promising to do X, or in the past we have done Y. But that's the heart of the conversation is values.
And there's a relational dimension to it.
Yeah.
Paid canvas operations here. Oh, well, we knocked on all these doors. Well, what happened? Well, they were for us or against us or undecided. And I got what issue they care about. And that goes into the computer. And then that creates a basis. Don't mess with those people that are against us. Just mess with the ones that are strongly for us, and maybe some of the swing. So it deflects from going out and engaging and persuading and arguing with people to just focus on the people that are already with us. Well, you don't win that way.
One of the themes I think that came out of the book, and you've always been talking about this, and it's something that's always drawn me to your work anyway, is that it's values-based organising, not issue-based organising. Can you tell us about why that's such an important distinction?
Yeah, I think that, so organising is a heart, head, and hands kind of thing. And I think we often dismiss just how significant the language of emotion is. That's the language of motivation. It's the language of caring. And, we'll tend to go right here, let's learn these skills, but forget about cultivating the commitment, the relational strength, the solidarity. Forget about that. Let's just go over here and focus on skills. Of course, ironically, the way you learn skills is to be highly motivated. And so it's like missing that piece. And what I've learned, so then if you do head, heart, hands, well, head is strategy work. That's strategic. How? The hands are how you actually do it. But why? That's an emotional question. And see, the emotional question is about narrative because, the oldest form of discourse we developed once we had words were stories. I mean, way back, everybody tells stories. Well, what the hell's that all about? Just like entertainment? No. What it's about is a moment in which you're confronted with disruption and you can react fearfully and as if it's a threat, or you can respond hopefully as it's a challenge. Now, that's a piece of work that is what narrative addresses. And I think the clearest example is I went with my partner to the seashore to see the sunset. The beautiful sunset turned orange, turned pink. That's moment number one. Moment number two, went to the seashore with my partner to see the sunset. It was orange, blue, it was really beautiful. And it started to rain. I turned to go, but she grabbed my arm and said, wait a second, it's only rain. As long as we're together, we're good. Now, if you unpack that second moment, that's a narrative moment. Mm-hmm. The first one is descriptive, it's not. Mm-hmm. And what makes it a narrative moment is that all of a sudden, the rain. What do? I react fearfully, got to get out of the rain. She reaches out to me out of love and sort of strengthens our relationship. And so the moral of the story is that love can conquer fear. Mm. That's all in that tiny. So see, this is a fundamental way we make sense of the world. And it's about emotion. It's about fear. It's about value. It's about caring. And if we don't speak the language of emotion, we're missing the boat. It's not something to be afraid of. That's why there's been so much, and that's what values are. They're feelings. A value is not some abstract concept. It's how we feel. What inspires, what we care for. St. Augustine talks about it's one thing to know the good, another to love it. Loving it is what enables action. So the whole ability to connect with other people, to connect with each other, to ground ourselves in what we really care for and our sources of hope, that's all that kind of work. Mm. And that's values work. Because when you say, let's match values, we were doing a project at MIT actually with, these were they're biotech people, but they're more bio than tech. There's community labs all around the world. And there's a guy building a movement there. And so it's, we did some training with them on public narrative, which was kind of cool to work with. It's interesting. Techies build things, but these folks grow things. Mm. It's a different kind of way of looking at things. And so they want to do a shared purpose thing. So they said, okay, well, this is easy. We'll just, have a questionnaire, digital, and then we'll have the algorithm just, see what we share, and that'll be our shared purpose. And so we said, well, you'll have the shared purpose of the algorithm, but you won't have a shared purpose of your people because it takes people to do that work with each other. And so they bought that. We did that. It was pretty cool. Came out with a really kind of cool, shared purpose statement for these folks. So that's why values for me is the core. And it also opens us up to connecting with other people that transcends category. That's one of the things I learned by having the chance to teach this stuff in Jordan or in Japan, and people say, oh, no, God, you can never cross. When you work in story, in values, and you take seriously the fact that we learn a lot of our values rather early in life, and you enable people to communicate those kinds of experiences, they see each other in those experiences. They feel each other in those experiences. So you're not doing, are you a this or are you a that? Everybody struggles with adversity. Growing up's not such an easy thing. People have challenges finding their own voice. And so when you get there, you see, oh my God, there's so much more ground to work with. And then on that basis, we decide what's strategic. It's like when I was in the farm workers and building farm workers union. Okay, we knew that, and strong values, commitments, and so forth. But, we did different kinds of campaigns depending on how we could advance our overall strategy. So pesticides or child labor, but we weren't defined by the issue. In other words, we were defined by the values. And so then we focus strategically, this issue. Because what's happened here a lot is that the issues become then identities. So I'm a fish person. You're a tree person. We can't work together, right? Because fish, trees, and we're going to the same donor. We're competing for money. What's that? We both have reverence for the natural world. What the hell? Why are we defining ourselves by issues? Issues are come and go. So that's kind of the distinction. So it's not like being against issues, but it's trying to define who we are in relationship to one another in terms of values. And then on that basis, develop the issues and the power that we need.
I'm going to put a couple of scenarios to you here, and these are real, and they're all from campaigns that I or others have encountered when practicing this framework of organising.
Oh, we're going to get real.
Yeah. And I'm just going to read you the scenario, and then I want your response. That's all.
Cool. No, it's great.
And I'm actually going to pick 5. I'm going to do all 5 practices here.
Oh, okay.
Starting with obviously story. So I found that when volunteers are crafting their own story of self, their stories are rooted in these. When we talk about challenge, choice, and outcome, the stories are rooted in such traumatic challenges. And so therefore the others in the room feel the need to also then craft an even more tragic story, which then leads to what a good friend of ours, Kwesi Chatham, calls the tragedy Olympics, in which everyone in the room is now just telling just really tragic stories. And that's not how it's supposed to work.
No, and it works that way. First, you have to start with your own. In other words, you have to model what we're doing. Because fundamentally, the stories are about how I overcame adversity. In other words, we all have to deal with adversity. Now, it's not interesting to say, hey, I was this. It's all, there's no learning there. It's like if they take the wolf out of the children's stories. I hate that because the whole point's the wolf. In other words, what it's all about, narrative, is about dealing with challenge and then finding the resources to do that. And so in a lot of these settings, people may be more articulate about their hurt, but even forgot where they get their hope. So they're equally important. And when you use story to do that, you model. It's not about the most tragic thing in the world. That's not the point. It's about what had meaning for you. Where'd you learn to care? Well, maybe it was that teacher that, stood up for you when nobody else did. Or, you know what the most common source of hope is around the world? What do you think? Most common source of hope.
Common source of hope around the world. That's a good question. Family? Life?
You're warm.
A newborn baby?
Mums. I find it culture after culture.
Yeah.
Because nobody's there for you except she is.
Yeah, it's true.
And often that sacrifice. And so, geez, I am worth something. This person gives me worth. So it's not just limited to moms. I mean, dads get in there too.
Yeah.
But it's a different thing. And I found it in culture after culture after culture. And, because that's about being human. And who we are to each other. And when people start articulating stuff like that, yeah, the other person gets it. Because they had something, not exactly, but similar. But so it's not a trauma it's not a trauma Olympics. Like who can tell them? It's not being taught well then. It's confused.
Yeah.
It's, why do I care? Why do I care? When did I start to care about what I care about? And there are moments. There really are moments. It's not everybody has like St. Paul and falls off the horse and has an epiphany. But we learn through our experience. We don't learn through philosophy. We learn through our experience. And moments are moments of rich experience in which there is challenge, there is hope or not. And others get it because we become emotionally present when we share those moments. And the emotional is the meaning of that moment. So that's when it's done right.
Okay, the next one. This literally, I heard someone say this to me in a campaign. Stephen, this campaign doesn't have the time nor the luxury for relationship building.
Yeah. It's very common. We don't have any time for that. That takes forever. No. We got this script. And we got the script because the digital guy told us what the script is and we did the polling. So just go read this script. We don't have time. Well, good luck. I mean, it's sand. There's nothing real there. It's confusing marketing with organizing. And it's kind of like, what we want to do is find the logo or whatever, and then attach that to a brand, a candidate, and then that's how it's going to work. Or we send paid canvassers around, which is not relational either. My experience has been that you can form real relationship very fast. It depends, in other words, to me, it's not about how long, it's how deep. And when you create a brave space in which people can actually engage with each other, people are blown away by how strong a connection they can create and then build on that. See, that's where I think it's like not understanding the relationship of story itself to relationship building is deep. And when that's what you're doing, it's not the same as a 30-year relationship, but here's the difference. A student invites another student to have a coffee because they're interested, the other person. Okay, so we go have coffee. Great conversation. And I say, hey, this was terrific. Why don't we get together again next week? I got exams. How about the next week? I got people coming from out of town. How about the next week? I'll send you an email. So sociologically speaking, just got dumped. That's what happened. Yeah. In other words, what was missing was enough motivation to risk committing to that other person that there's something there you can build together. And so the foundation of relationships are commitments. And they're risks. Say, it takes trust to build a relationship. No, trust comes from relationships. It doesn't precede them. because it's risky. Commitment, scary. But that's what it means to build relationships, because then you're building people committed to other people, risking that and building something new, something fresh, something collective. That's why it's so fundamental. But it doesn't have to take 6 years. I mean, I've done campaigns in a week where that's how we start, because it just grounds it and it gives it glue, and people see that they're being seen. And, Dave Fleischer in LA developed this, what he calls deep canvassing. And this was after the anti-gay marriage proposition passed in California in 2008. And so they decided to go into the precincts that voted against them. And but they weren't going there to have a fight. They were going there to try to build a relationship. So you come to the door, you start, hi, I'm so-and-so, I live over there, and how long are you? You just do some relational work. And then you get to questions where you differ. But when you start with the division, you never get past it. And the power of relationship is you can build a common ground, so then the difference has a context. It's not, you're not defined by, and they're not defined by the issue. Because, we're both humans here. Yeah, we disagree. It's different than just, how come you voted against gay people? Okay, that's not going to go anywhere. If you do the relational work, you're not going to agree on everything, but at least you're seeing each other as humans, and that helps.
Yeah. Third one. So you want me to identify a whole bunch of different individual leaders. I don't think people have time to commit to this amount of work, and quite frankly, I don't trust them to execute our strategy properly.
Yeah. I mean, the best way to start a people-based campaign is not to believe in the people. I mean, fundamentally. And we had this issue with the Obama campaign, actually, in 2007, when we were launching volunteer-based committees. You can't count on them. And we wanted to give them access to the van, the database. No, we can't give volunteers access. It was like a fight. We had it right there in the first Camp Obama. And we won. They didn't become committed until they saw that with a volunteer operation in California with no more than about 8 or 10 organizers, we generated enough phone calls into Texas to break the phone system of the whole campaign. So where the hell did that come from? Volunteers? Oh, gee. So we had to do proof of concept. But it starts with trying to understand people. And that if you approach it, I'm trying to get you to do me a favor, or I'm trying to get you to make this huge sacrifice. No, I'm trying to offer you an opportunity to do something meaningful about something you care about. And it's not just words, it's how you approach it. And, it's a different thing. Because if you come to it thinking, oh my God, everybody's really busy, they can't possibly do, it would be an imposition. But that's not what organizing is. It's offering people an opportunity to matter, to count. And they make choices then about their priorities. And, it's not everybody's going to do that. But you're looking for the people not only who care about that, but also care about other people. The first get out the vote I ever did was in 1968 in East Los Angeles. We were supporting Bobby Kennedy. And we had a whole delegation of farm workers, non-citizens, came to East LA where the Latino vote is huge, mobilizing and organizing to get out to vote. How do you do a get out to vote? Well, Fred Ross actually told me, okay, well, you go in this precinct, you go door to door till you find a person who will take responsibility for the rest of that precinct. At that point, you train them. And then you go to the next precinct. And then you come back and you see how that person is doing. In other words, from the very get-go, we're developing leadership. and understanding that the math of organizing is multiplying. It's not like 101. You get a person to get more people, That's how it's built. And that's what, that campaign was a great campaign. Sadly, we lost him later that night. And that moment I'll never forget. But it was this way of organizing, even in a short, mobilizing thing, but we were still looking for leadership, recruiting that leadership, delegating responsibility, providing the training and support, so that, because then it's owned by the people themselves. Otherwise, here, let me tell you to do this, that, and then you don't own it.
I think one of the more profound moments of doing your class when we did teams was having leadership work together in interdependent teams.
Yes.
As a union organiser, and I can think specifically of a particular workplace. I had a workplace in Adelaide. It was an energy, like a power company, a call centre.
Yeah.
And I had slowly identified union delegates or shop stewards across several floors. And they all sat in physical pods. And so my aim was to get a leader on each pod.
Yeah.
But I never thought about getting them to work with each other. The relationship was still me as a union organiser visiting each leader and asking them to, do stuff. And when I did the class, I was like, my life would have been even more effective and more motivating for them if I got them to work together.
Exactly. Interdependence, that's what power is about too, is interdependence. Because we're interdependent with people and institutions in the world. The question is the terms of interdependence. And if the terms are more or less balanced, your needs, my resources, and vice versa, we can build a lot of power with each other. But when they're out of whack and all the resources are here and most of the needs are over here, it turns into domination. So it's understanding the critical nature of interdependence as not only motivational, but power building, because then we're complementing each other. And where that team stuff came from, it really was when I was working my PhD. There was a guy named Richard Hackman who passed away a few years ago. He was a real guru of teams. And his work, he ran the organization behavior program here for a while. His work was all practice-oriented. All practice-oriented. He started by studying, by listening to black boxes in planes that had crashed to figure out what happened in the cabin crew. What he discovered was there was this stratification where the navigator wouldn't tell the captain because he was afraid to, all this. So Richard got real interested in teams, and then he studied symphony orchestras. There's one that has no conductor. Oh, that's interesting how to do that. So that's one of the real gifts I had, was working with Richard. And because his focus was practice, just like ours was. And so when I learned about teams, I learned from Richard. And and his protege, Ruth Wagaman, we were doing a project with the Sierra Club where we tried this team thing. That was just before the Obama thing. So we brought it into the Obama campaign to see, let's try this. And so that's what we did. And, we had the first Camp Obama, we had over 200 people, divide them up by congressional district, and then form your leadership team in your district. And it worked. It worked because it was clear from the beginning, leadership was not trying to do it all yourself. It wasn't just you. That leadership was a practice, not a position, a way of doing things and doing things with others interdependently. And, not everyone worked and all that, but we saw both the accountability and the motivation. And then we had the problem of scale. Well, then we discovered each team member could build their own team. And then you could create a cascade of developing leadership and building teams into a constituency that was kind of amazing. And That's how we won South Carolina for Obama. It's Stephen, I really appreciate that because this stuff is a constant learning. I mean, anybody that says, "Oh, I got it all figured out," well, yeah, go figure somewhere else because it's people, and we change and they change, and so it's constant learning. But the focus on practices as opposed to models is really important. Models. I mean, I'm of a view. There's a school of thought. All models are wrong because a model is a snapshot of a dynamic process in a particular moment, and then we treat that. That's how things work. Well, then we start trying to fit people into the model rather than using the model to have a perspective on people. And that's kind of what the economics profession's been doing for 70 years. Is no, the models, that's what's real, that's truth. But, you're just, that's just your experience, it's biased, blah, blah, blah. It's a real confusion. When you build on practices, first of all, you're building on stuff people do, like tell stories, build relationships. You're coupling the skills with the values and with the concepts. So when you put those three together in a practice, like whether it's telling stories or whether it's building relationships, it's a dynamic invitation to keep learning. And it's just very different.
The fourth one, which is strategy.
Love strategy.
Yeah, I think this iteration of field organising has run its course, and we're going to now allocate more of our financial resources towards spending on digital advertising, which is going to what you were talking about before a bit.
Yeah.
That's happening a little bit more now in Australia.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Sorry we contributed that. No, it's awful because but you still have constraints on campaign spending.
Yes, and yeah. It varies from state to state and at a national, federal level as well.
Well, see, when the Supreme Court here said money is speech, then free speech, no constraints, zero. So it created infinite demand, and then the whole industry was built feeding on that demand. But anyway, it's not completely out of control. But you say, okay, what is strategy? I mean, what are we doing? What are we trying to strategize? And they're saying, let's do, okay, well, why? Let's look at it. Now, the clearest definition I've found for strategy, it's how you turn what you have into what you need to get what you want. And we all do that. Humans all strategize. We oversleep. We got to figure out how to get to work on time. So we're natural storytellers, we're natural strategists. And we tend to take strategy and turn it into this complex, elevated thing where the people on top are the only ones that can strategize because that's their control. And I think so first is just getting real about what strategy is. And so what are the resources? What's the outcome? And what's our, quote, theory of change? How are we going to turn those resources into outcome? Now, what I found when I was doing the Why David Sometimes Wins book, that power is a function not simply of resources, but how you use them. And, so David tries to take on Goliath with the sword and the shield. He's gone. No, he realized he's a shepherd and he can do it with a stone and a sling. And Goliath's so overconfident, he wins. In other words, it's looking real, but you don't start with we are resourceless. That's the other thing. Is and I love the Montgomery bus boycott because it's an example of people go on a bus boycott for a year to desegregate the buses, starts the modern civil rights movement in the United States. Well, what resources do they have? I mean, they're fighting the bus company, they're fighting the whole white establishment. My God, what kind of resources do they have? They don't have anything. Well, it turns out they had feet. And, if they use their feet to walk to work and deny the bus company the bus fare, instead of using their feet to get on the bus and give the bus company the bus fare, individual dependency is transformed into collective power. And that's kind of where you start with strategy. You start with what you got, and then how do you turn that into power? And that means discovering the interdependencies. Where's their vulnerability? Oh, we have this. Gandhi said, every system of oppression depends to some extent on the consent of the oppressed. Now, it can be highly constrained, but the point is that we can always say no. It may be costly as hell. So you start by looking to people, you start to looking to people's resources, what we can, what we build. And then you ask, okay, then how do we make this work? How do we make this powerful? Now, in the example you gave, they're starting with the idea that a digital communication is powerful. Prove that to me. And that mechanism of digital communication and doing lots of texts and being in lots of people's texts, that really works. Well, it doesn't really work. What works is people connecting with people, and when you actually own that. But, there's an industry there on saying it doesn't work. So, the other thing is, I teach, we work together online. So it's not about online, it's how you use it. And we create this relational space. People learn with each other, and it's kind of amazing how real it can become. But that's not what they do. It's all about individuals, it's all about targeting, it's all about ROI, frankly. Return on investment. How much does it cost per vote to blah, blah, blah? That's how they're operating. So, but that's a frequent argument.
And the last one, which builds off of this, but it moves into that action space. Let's just get the candidate and a couple of paid canvassers to talk to voters. That'll be enough.
Enough for what? What are you doing? What are you building? I think one of the things that we've learned is that commitment also grows out of action. In other words, the difference between, I'm for you, and signing a petition, it's not huge, but it's different. It's an action. And we know through what's called consistency theory that once a person takes an action, it's like when you've given money, are you more likely to volunteer or less? And some people will say, oh, no, well, you've already used up. It's like a hydraulic view. You have so much to commit, and then you spend it. It's the opposite. Once you commit, you're more likely to commit more. And so action is critical as an element of commitment. But it's also how you make facts on the ground, how you actually make it real. So going around and having a few conversations, fine, not building anything. To build, you got to have action, because that's how the reality becomes. That's how I can say facts on the ground become real. And so we were taught in organizing, if you can't count it, it didn't happen. Now, that's not to say all the statistical stuff is wonderful. It's saying, look, if you can't tell the difference between something happening and not happening, we're in real trouble here. So, and a lot of us had the experience. You go to have a meeting, you come back. Fred Ross trained us in this. He says, okay, how many people at the meeting? Oh, there were a lot of people. What do you mean a lot? Well, I don't know. But how many? Well, I better count. Oh, okay, so how many were invited? Oh, what about the people who didn't come? What was the difference? What about the people who came? How many of them volunteered? In other words, you're trying to really look at organizing as a real craft in which action is measurable, because that's how you learn. And so it's not about control. It's about, oh, that worked, that didn't work. So it builds in this constant learning. And that got drilled. It's one of the things I am most grateful for, was being introduced to that way. When I first started with the farm workers, me and a farm worker guy who had a lot of street smarts, we didn't need this county shit. I'd been one with the people in Mississippi, and hey, he knew. So, we'd kind of show up and maybe, and And so Fred said, this was after a little while, Fred said, Caesar wants to talk to you. Okay, so Caesar, Fred, and us. Caesar says, look, I want to thank you for your contributions. I think it's really helpful, and I hope that you'll be able to continue. But let me just be clear. This guy's in charge. You do what he says. Otherwise, you're out of here. Oh, shit. Well, we wanted to stay. So then we began to learn. You know?
There are organisers listening back home listening to this right now, and I know that they're remembering me constantly saying to them that soon is not a time and some is not a number.
It's an excuse.
Yeah.
I had an organizer one time who, this was in the days of 3x5 cards, and she would lose them. And I said, I had a session with, wait a second, those cards, they're not cards. Every one of those cards is a person. How can you go around losing people? Oh, I didn't think of it that way. No, it's making it real.
You said something this during the year, last semester in one of the hallway hangouts, and it's really annoying because you were asked a question about organising by one of the students. And I actually can't remember the specifics of what the question, but I know what...
I love the hallway.
But I know what the answer was, because you talked about the two Obama campaigns, 08 and 12, from an organising standpoint.
Yeah.
And your reflection about the 08 one was different to the 12 in terms of the way, who was being organised and by whom.
That's right.
And I didn't know this, and I think it's worth sharing with everyone else. Tell us about.
Well, the first campaign was a staff-supported volunteer effort. In other words, volunteers did so much. That's what we were doing with the committees and all that stuff. And that was what was different about that campaign. In the second campaign, it was a volunteer-supported staff campaign. In other words, now it was all this staff, and not building the teams, not doing that, and then using volunteers and deploying them. Well, that's day and night. It's day and night. And you know, what they wanted was more control. Because when you're doing it the first way, no, you're taking risks, you're delegating, but you're building something. On the second one, you're just deploying what you have, and you're not building. We had this fight in the farm workers when we got the ag labor law passed in California, which meant we could have elections at ranches because we weren't under the national law. And so we had to get real about winning secret ballot elections. We were up against the Teamsters and we're up against the growers, and so it took some real organizing. We had two theories. One was, well, the way you did this was to build committees inside. And you had to recognize that secret ballot didn't mean anything. Folks coming from Mexico, the PRI always won, you know, it didn't mean anything. So what you had to do was take power from the employer before the election. Because if you didn't do that, you were going to lose. Now, the other view was, no, you have organizers, lots of organizers building individual relationships with lots of people. Well, guess who won? Eliseo Medina and I were doing that in the vegetables and the orange, and we kicked ass. The other group that was doing that, they lost. I mean, it was a source of some real tension within the union. But that was the difference between what we were doing in the first Obama campaign and the second one.
And then I reflected on that and thought to myself of our experience in Australia. The best that we have, well, I think anyway, the best that we have got in terms of our field operation has been more of the 12 than the 08. We've never got to a point, certainly I can only speak from experience of my own home state of Victoria, we've never got to the point where right across all of our campaigns where we've got organisers in place that we've been able to develop the team model to the way that we want it to be. Yeah. We've had, we've probably hired between 20 to 25 organisers across, 25 districts, and I reckon there'd be probably 5 or 6 organisers that managed to build teams, and those were the campaigns that were the biggest.
Yeah, I mean, again, this stuff has to be learned as practice, and it has to be learned. I guess one of the things I've certainly discovered at the Kennedy School is we have a lot of unlearning we have to do in order to create the space for new learning. So it's taking training. I don't like the word, it's like training a pet or something. It's educating in the real sense of it. Unless there's some real commitment to that, they're not going to get it. There's also, in the church, they talk about formation as opposed, like in the seminary, you go for formation, not just for training. What does formation mean? It has to do with values, has to do with relationships, it has to do you as a person and the skills. It's not just the skills. And see, I think it has to do then with how we train or educate organizers. They have to experience it. And if they haven't experienced it, how are they going to do it? And so it means a stronger upfront invest. And the other thing is coaching. Now with everything we teach coaching. First thing, we have you've got a leadership problem. Okay, so now my job is to help you with this leadership problem. Now, I've never talked to you before, right? So you present your problem, and my job is to help you. Only I can give no advice. All I can do is ask questions. That's it. That's all. That's all that's allowed. And at first there's silence. And then they start learning how to ask questions that illuminate for the other person understanding that they may have had, but they didn't know they had it. And so then it creates learning as an interdependent experience. And so I may not know the details about, but you do. And so my job is to be like, you're the fish in the water. And my job is to be outside the water and ask you lots of questions about the water. And then, whoa, wait, you're seeing it differently. So now we start everything with that because we want people to learn interdependently. And that really makes a difference. And it's part of creating a brave space, not a safe space, where people can take risks with each other. So I think that it really requires learning a craft. Now, it doesn't have to take forever. With Campo Bambo, we were introducing stuff, but we had coaching. In other words, the job of the organizer then was to coach the new people. And with the coaching, then it sustains the learning. And then they don't just it'd be easier to do this, or, well, so-and-so said that. And part of that is what you were saying about learning together. So periodically, you get everybody. What are we learning? What? So that you make people partners in developing the craft. And then they own it, and they learn more, and then they can teach it. So it's thinking about it more in that way, a way of preparing people for this.
And I think seeing it as well. I may have said this the last time you and I spoke on the podcast, and if I'm repeating myself to the previous show, I apologise. But when I took the course, and obviously you're supposed to have a project, and the week after we did teams and structure, I launched my core team for my project. Yeah. I have never been so nervous going into that meeting that we had, that 90-minute launching of the core team. Yeah. Because we'd practiced it in class, right? Right. But it's different when it's real. I know. No. And I was shitting myself for the full 90 minutes. And I remember as much as you can rehearse, I was just trying to remember each slide and how to, I did it like 20 times. And thinking how was this going to go down. And I had a reasonably good public relationship with the leadership that I was organising, but I was still nervous. I was thinking this is going to be a disaster. Anyway, it went well. And that night there was a office hours with you. Oh. And I attended. Yeah. I've actually gone back and watched the video because it's quite funny, because I'm now telling the story of how it's going without telling everyone that it went well. And your face at the start was kind of like, how is this going to turn out? And I'm sort of, and I said, and it was a roaring success. And the whole, everyone's face in office hours went, oh, thank God for that. Oh, that's so good. I'm so glad to hear that, Stephen.
That's great.
You know, and
That's great, Stephen.
if I hadn't done that, you know, you sometimes just like as you say, getting on the bike and falling off.
You got to get on the bike.
Got to get back on again. And it was a come to Jesus moment for me.
Very cool.
In the power of interdependency, particularly in launching teams. And I'm such an advocate for it now. When I talk to folks, I'm saying getting organised, you've got to find your leaders, man. You've got to get together and you've got to launch that team. You've got to start working with each other.
It's really, and it can be fun, but it's got to be real.
Yeah.
And that's, the bicycle. I mean, that will always be the pedagogical model that we use.
Yeah.
You know, you fall. It's not a mistake. It's a step toward learning.
Yeah.
And if you can get people to actually buy that, then it frees them up.
Yeah.
It really frees them up.
You were in Europe doing the book tour.
Yes.
In the middle of the year. I just got back the other week. I'm interested in your thoughts on speaking to folks, activists throughout the various countries you visited. What were your reflections and takeaways from people's mindset right now? Where's organising in that space? Are they having successes? Are they hitting walls? What kind of, did you come away feeling positive about it, or did you come away feeling like there's a lot of work to be done there?
Well, both. I came away very positive for several reasons. Well, the first book site was in Venice at the Biennale, and it was with Artists for Social Change. And we did Story of Self work with them. And they loved it. And it was just, oh, shit. So that was an unlikely beginning. Mostly people from France. But then I went from Venice to the UK. And it was great. I mean, Steph, she had a session with a little over 100 organizers, people actually doing organizing for 4 hours. Only it wasn't 4 hours. It was interview, it was practice, it was breakouts. It was just really good.
Right.
It's when I really developed a lot of respect for her because, really getting it. And, and we met with a bunch of Labour MPs, some of the new ones, who were not very happy with the leadership.
No.
And that's real. We met with students out at Cambridge. Mostly it was international students. It was a bunch of different settings with different kind of constituencies and organized by people who work with those constituencies. So it was great. And different, because Catherine Ferrer, I don't know if you know Catherine, she worked with the NHS for a long time doing innovations. She works with us. She set up a thing at, what's it called, the King's Fund, health people. And people struggling because the NHS, they put it in the government, there's all kinds of, but boy, they were hungry for this. Some of them had training online, been part of it. And, you could see in these different settings. And we did with the Teachers Union, which was also very cool. But then probably the thinnest were the activists, because they sometimes substitute issues for people. And it becomes too ideological. But with people who are actually working with people, that for me was always a priority. So the UK was very good. We've been involved in follow-up since then. Steph actually came here to be my head TF last year. She's going to come again this year. And she's like building a whole thing. So, but the Labour Party was disappointing. And people were pretty disappointed by that. And, but then was Copenhagen. Loved it. Really loved it. The folks who work with there, Rina Bastrup, and they had great events with public, with the whole National Labor Union leadership. I mean, all together. Because RINA had been using some of our stuff.
Yeah.
And so they weren't totally unfamiliar. But again, it was with, and we also met with MPs there. And it felt to me like, oh, there's a culture here. It felt like I'm with my people. There's a culture here that is not like here. And that the whole way we approach things is so much more resonant with the way that, just the way things work. Part of it is that having real parties means that there's a form of constituency organization that can balance the parliamentary organization. So you have the electeds and you have the party. Mm. Where I learned this most was in Canada, actually, because I worked up there for a long time. And I saw this here where there's no parties. It's all just, how do you put it together? So there's at least more balance there between constituency organization and legislative representation. Aside from the parliamentary system, is just so much. I came back a bit of a royalist, I have to say. Because,
you said that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's because it's clear the prime minister's not a king.
Yeah,
Government's just anyway. So Copenhagen was really terrific, and we went to the folk schools, and they have that whole worker tradition, worker education stuff.
Yeah.
No, it was really good. Then was Spain, Madrid. That was a little more, the people who organized the Madrid stuff were from Catalonia. Yeah. So that wasn't quite, but we did university, a couple of universities, and yeah, it was good. And there I could speak the language, so that kind of helped.
Yeah, that helps.
And then Amsterdam, and it was great. Again, they had an event in Utrecht where they had a movie theater, one of those big theaters, 300 people there to talk about organizing, most of them young. So holy shit, this is really good. There's so much that can be built here and done here. Also, we had another union event that was really good in Amsterdam. And so, there was just a whole lot of interest, a whole lot of resonance, very attractive to me to work with those folks, because I don't know, we didn't have to fight the marketing thing all the time.
Yeah.
And there was at least some sense of the collective. It's not like here. But of course, there's the assault that comes from the world of, the private sector, the world of firms and corporate and all that crap. But there's still more resistance. I mean, there's better traditions. Leadership is more proximate. Now, I would tell people there, like we had this thing in Amsterdam, I guess it was an evening kind of thing. It was very cool. And, they kept talking about how terrible their system is, saying, hey, wait a second here.
Yeah.
And then, of course they have their problems. But I really, really enjoyed it. And we didn't get to do France or Germany. I'd still like to do both. Now I have this invitation to go to Thailand in end of January, which it's health equity people. Now you may have.
Yeah, I did the with Noor.
Yeah, you did that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they're having some big thing, and they want me to go give a talk. I like those people. Yeah. I think they're really good.
Yeah.
It's we've done stuff for 5 years with them, and you and Noor. That's interesting. I don't know. This opportunity to do stuff outside the U.S. The other place we're doing a lot is Mexico and Colombia, because we're involved in a presidential campaign in Colombia. The person, she was the first woman mayor of Bogota and the first gay mayor of Bogota. And so she's trying to build a party that we're trying to support.
Right.
And then in Mexico, we're doing stuff within the church and also not. And there's just a whole core of folks there that there's so much that can be done. It's more like we need to find the person that can anchor the organization in the country. And then we can really grow it. And I especially like doing this stuff in Mexico because I can use the language.
Yeah.
No, we did a session with called Diálogo por la Paz, Dialogue for Peace. And it was formed when two Jesuits were murdered in Chihuahua. And they formed this movement kind of within the church to fight violence, domestic, street, government, cartels. But it's really committed people. And we connected with them, and we were down there for a few days staying with the sisters of something. And the beds were hard, but
And the pillows were hard.
Yeah, it was all right. But it was working with people of faith where it really matters, and that's kind of how it was with the farm workers. And you don't have to worry about cynicism. You don't have to worry about corruption, and because these were people from 3 states plus the national, so we're continuing to work with them and see how they needed help structuring a movement into an organization, and that's what we're trying to do there. So the international stuff is so interesting.
I want to end on a high note,
Yes.
and obviously in class you quote one of your favourite Jewish philosophers, Maimonides, and he says, "Hope is the belief in the plausibility of the possible, not only the necessity of the probable." Where do you look for hope today, based on those teachings of?
I think, rock bottom moments. Well, and here we think we've hit rock bottom. It seems every day there's a further bottom.
Yeah.
But what they teach you is that what we've been doing has not been working. And if you look at it in a particular way, you can see there's more opportunity to change, to do different stuff. But then how do you get your head around that? I guess one of the problems in times like we're in, Tom Hayden used to say, change is slow except when it's fast. And the pace of it is like, and so I've been saying that under these circumstances, to be a pessimist or an optimist is arrogant. Because you can't predict the future. Oh, everything's going to be okay. No, everything's going to be. But hope is more realistic for the reason you just said. Hope being belief in the plausibility of the possible, as opposed to the necessity of the probable. It's like we always expect Goliath to win, but sometimes David does. We thought electing a black man the president of the United States back in 2000, it never happened. In other words, it's the sense, it's between fantasy and certainty. It's the space of possibility, of could be. And that's precious space, because you're not trying to be predictive, but you're recognizing could be. And that's where creativity is. It's where strategy is. It's where invention is. It's not just following the rules, because it's a different time. And I guess with groups I've been meeting with, we talk about this. We usually start with something like this. And then say, the trouble is where we look for hope. It's like, oh, that great leader is going to come and save us. Or that great plan, that manifesto is going to save us. He said, no, and I'll ask people, how many of you have had experiences of hurt? Well, if you've been on the planet, you raise your hand. And then I'll say, what about experiences of hope? Yeah, everybody, because if you hadn't had the hurt, you wouldn't think the world needed fixing. You wouldn't be in this room if you hadn't had experiences of hope. So sometimes we look out there for what's in here. And what we need to do in times like these is join with others and generate the kind of creativity, the kind of hope that we can, so that we can have the creativity to deal with this fucking situation. Excuse me, I shouldn't use that word.
Go for it.
No, but because the worst thing you can do in circumstances like this is to keep doing what you were doing, but do more of it. And that's the reaction. No, this is a chance to chart new stuff. And I think that's the opportunity we have here.
Well, Marshall, thank you for the opportunity to sit down and have a chat with you again today. It's been great. It's been too long between drinks.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. It's really been a joy.
Hey, Social Democrats. Thanks for listening. Today's episode was hosted by myself, Stephen Donnelly, and produced by Grace Eyre. If you like the show, please rate us and review us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you really like the show, then join our Patreon community for early and ad-free access to each episode. We regularly take questions and comments from our Patreon members, so get in there if you want to have your say. And finally, get all the latest updates and bonus content by following Socially Democratic on our social media channels. The links are in our show notes. See you next Friday.